Alrighty, we made it. We had a bit of technical difficulty. Sorry that we're late. This is an all Aussie affair today. I don't know if we've had a stream with only
all Aussie affair
or only Aussies on it, but yeah, look, we're getting a few reposts of the stream, so that's great. We've got a couple of very special guests. We've got Adz and Sam.
Oh,
how you going?
Welcome. A pleasure to have
so
you.
yeah,
on.
I'm not probably known as Adza
or
by
Adza.
everyone.
Sorry, Adza. I don't want to.
You're good, mate.
I was giving a nickname, which is very Aussie as well. So we're here to talk about your release, but there's more to it. Like, you guys come from, interesting backgrounds. You can talk about how you even met, but Adza and I have connected through mutuals through the space. And obviously, he's been working with Sam for this drop, but Adza told me that he was involved in sat hunting, and sat hunting was something which people are still doing. We're seeing the big mining pools starting to hoard their own special sats, which I think is interesting. Adza, I'm sure, will comment on. But yeah, Adza, maybe introduce yourself, maybe how you got into the space, even your introduction into Bitcoin, but then talk to us in particular, maybe actually before you even talk about sat hunting, for the people who are watching this who maybe don't know what a special sat is or what it means, what they are, and then why you are hunting them and what that entailed. But yeah, welcome, mate.
So
it's a lot of questions at once.
So I could just start with I guess a rundown of how I ended up in crypto.
Do that first.
And then yeah, so like it's kind of a cool story, but it kind of started with the GameStop short squeeze, which I was involved with on Reddit, and I made a bit of money that allowed me to get into the market because I had money to lose, because that's what you do when you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then they had their loop ring marketplace with NFTs. And me and Sam did a few little things on there actually, but it was a very small marketplace. And then that eventually just led to me looking at, other sort of art-focused crypto stuff. And then in terms of like getting into, ordinals, it's funny. I had a homie literally just like messaged me and was like, dude, you should inscribe this thing. And it was like a string of BRC text, right? It was for meme, which was the second one. And so I put some text in a box and I inscribed it. I had no idea what I was doing. And I forgot about it. And then a homie messaged me and was like, hey, they're like $100 each, and they cost me $1 each. And so that obviously, that definitely like piques interest. And then, I mean, from there, there was a huge sort of like journey into sat hunting, but maybe it'd help to like define a bit of the terms first. And I assume you know what sat hunting is, and Sam knows my poor explanations probably of sat hunting. But yeah, essentially the ordinal theory or consensus protocol, which runs on top of nodes, this basically numbers every Satoshi from the first ever mined, right? So the first block, the reward is 50 Bitcoin back in 2009. And the very first Satoshi ever mined was sat number 1. And there's 100 million per Bitcoin, and there's 50 Bitcoin, right? So the first block had whatever that number is, 100 million.
50 by 100 million.
Yeah. So it's like billions, right?
50 bill maybe, if that's correct. But yeah, anyway.
So essentially, like what ordinals lets you do is, if you want, make every single sat non-fungible because we can identify them, right? And so where this translates to sort of art and collectability is that Bitcoin has what no one else can have, which is like this actual provenance of where the canvas came from. And I think the best example I've given many a time is that if I show my mum a Bored Ape, she's like, what the fuck is this monkey? Why is it worth 100K? If I explain to her that I have a bit of Bitcoin from the first bit ever sent by Satoshi in 2009, she understands that, and she's like, she's not a techie, like. So I think there's a very good bridge to explaining rare sats in a conceptual way that people outside of this space just fundamentally understand why that would be valuable as a digital thing. And that's a very hard bridge to gap, as you probably know, right? Like digital art versus art, and like, there's always that distinction made whether it's warranted or not. So I kind of fell in love with like the numbers of like palindromes, repeating numbers. And a little side note, to this, the collection is, the parent is on the best palindrome I ever found years ago, which was 7, 9, 11 consecutive number eights, and then 9, 7, right? So statistically, there's way under single digits of satoshis that are anywhere near that many repeating numbers. And again, that's lucky in Asian Japanese culture, so it seemed perfect. And in terms of how I got into it, honestly, it was kind of gate kept by a lot of the big sat hunters who were making a lot of money, and I basically just put in like 0.1 Bitcoin and just sent it into an exchange, pulled it out, and I was like, scanned it, and I was like, okay, there's a little bit in here, and I built up a bit of courage, like sending, half a Bitcoin back and forth a few times a day. Like that's not the most relaxing thing to do, right? If you mess that shit up, you just lose your funds. So yeah, it really turned into like a sort of big journey where I was buying them OTC before I was hunting, and I was in the Discords, like, in the first few people, and I ended up using like a sat hunting bot that a homie DZ in San Fran sort of offered me, and that automated the process, and so that was like a wild thing to experience. Found some really cool ones, some that are just like so rare that I shouldn't have found them, really, statistically. And yeah, I guess that's kind of like the story of how I got into it. And then it just got to this point where it wasn't lucrative unless you were someone. I mean, I know the numbers, I know these people. There was people with 100 Bitcoin sending it back and forth, right? So with 100 back and forth, you can do millions of dollars a day, which just means if you're competing against that, you get exponentially screwed by fees with a smaller amount because you do so many transactions. So yeah, I kind of just fell into it and then fell in love with the maths and like it's like a collector's card to me. It's like all of these masks in the project are on a bit of Bitcoin that is not only the first Bitcoin ever sent, it's the first of the 10 Satoshi sent in block 9 that was mined by him in block 9, then he sent to Hal Finney. And so like, to say you have one of the Satoshis from the first Bitcoin ever sent by Nakamoto is, to me, that's a pretty compelling story.
Yeah, it really is narrative based, isn't it? And like you said, obviously the ability to track and trace sats, which is the whole reason we have ordinals, is very special. So tell us about I want to dive still further into the sat hunting. So you're sending these sats back and forth. You're having to like eat the fees, I assume. How was the process once you received the Bitcoin back from a centralized exchange? How long was the scan? Like, what would you do? Then how are you separating the sats out that you wanted to keep and then washing them back through? Like, what did your day look like?
So it sort of changed over time how you did it. So it started by literally you send it to an exchange and you pull it out, right? And then you go to a website which still is there, satting, SATING, .io, and that'll scan for rare sats, and it also allows you to extract them, right? But at the start, you were limited to extracting 1 or 2 per block, and sometimes you'd find 20. So there's all these things that stopped you from being able to be efficient. And then as time went on, people made like automated bots. We see miners now stacking, like, I don't know which miner it was, but there's a wallet that's been stacking uncommon Satoshi. So that's the first sat of every block. And they usually start with a few numbers and have a bunch of zeros after them. So they look cool, right? But, there's miners that are just pulling all of them out of circulation, because whenever if you get rewarded a block at the moment, you get 3.25 Bitcoin, or is it 3.125? I think it's 3.125. But You know, that's a lot of Satoshis to look through, but you're guaranteed to get three uncommons there because there's three. Oh, sorry, are you going to get three uncommons? Yeah, you are. You're going to get three
Yeah,
uncommons, right?
first in a yeah.
Um, and then the people mining early were getting 50 uncommons, but they weren't even identified. Um, so you know, the miners definitely have an advantage, and if they want to pull those sats, they can. Uh, you know, some of them are the same people that were complaining about graffitiing on the blockchain and how all the art we're putting on is not cool. While they raked 200 million in fees or more over, you know, a reasonably short amount of time. So yeah, dude, I'm kind of, it's like a sat cabal. I'm like not really in that. I sort of disagree with the gatekeeping and shit they did. There's a few good ones in there. Shout out Billy. Um, but yeah, dude, it was a very gatekeepy thing that I had to figure out myself. But I'll always be proud of the fact that when I got that bot, I had a technique and my percentage of like rare sats that I was pulling in was significantly higher than people with, you know, a shitload more Bitcoin. So I had a little system that was hard to prove it worked, but seemed to give me an edge. So yeah, and I've still got rare sats sitting around, you know. Sort of just waiting for the right time to do something, inscribe something, you know, whatever.
Did you become a Sparrow wallet power user then, in terms of like separating the UTXOs and freezing them and keeping them all separate? Like how did you go with the technical leap?
I have maybe 1,200 wallets with stuff in them because I was like separating sats into wallets, and you cannot do what I was doing without knowing exactly what the fuck you're doing with Sparrow. And look, if you're a power user anyway, get Sparrow and learn to like cancel transactions and front run other people and, you know, up it so it doesn't sit in the mempool. Like it's fucking hard to learn, but it is a great tool, and it allows you to control every individual UTXO and spend it however you want. But it doesn't tell you if it's a rare sat, so you better know that's the UTXO with the rare sat, right?
Yeah, that's the trickiest thing, because it's not like ordinals aware, which is, you know, what the wallets, I guess, Xverse, Leather, Unisat, Magic Eight, and all of the Phantom, the wallets that have built for that, which has been amazing for like mass onboarding. So are there, like, how do you still keep an eye on it? Are there these rare sats that are still out there that people would have? There'd be a lot of Bitcoin holders that have got sats that we deem as rare that are just sitting in their wallet. So they're people still kind of raking through the centralized exchanges, or like, was a lot of
I
it,
think,
has a lot of it been sought through?
look, I was doing it for a while and I knew every exchange and I knew the ratio. So you could just look at the ratio of uncommons to the number of Bitcoin to get a rough estimate of how much it had been already sort of tapped. And those numbers were going down. And so it became less and less lucrative for the smaller guy and only lucrative if you had, I mean, I know people with 100 Bitcoin back and forth that were doing that, right? So you can imagine just, you know, they're getting like 100 times more Satoshis to look at, 100 million times more. Like, I mean, technically a billion times more, I think. But it became a game of a cabal that controlled it all. And you know, it's pretty obvious who those people are. I mean, you know, I think there was some projects that acted pretty disingenuously and sort of like had mints around sats and uh, you know, we don't have to get into it, but I think it's worth just sort of like explaining what happened and the fact that, you know, probably sats and rare sats struggled because of the greed of a few that had a lot of supply and decided that they could, you know, do whatever the fuck they wanted. So you know, I
I guess
always respected the few that were like fair and you know, it was the gatekeeping thing. It was like they found a way to make money and it was not easy. And I just was like, fuck it, I'm finding out, you know, and was successful. But there's not many others that weren't sort of within the, you know, the little crew. The one cool thing, I guess, that's worth mentioning is year and a half ago, I found was it nine? 2 million of a sat, which was from block 286, right? And so that's a vintage block. It is the third or fourth block ever sent transacted, but it didn't have a badge because we didn't know. You know how like 78 has a badge for Halfini? 9 Nakamoto, right? So 286, I found all these sats, but they weren't really worth much because there was no story behind them. They didn't have a badge. And after an absolute shitload of sleuthing, I found that a VC called Dustin Trammell, I found his blog post with cryptographic signed proof that he still controlled that wallet. And so basically there was a narrative there that, like, you know, Dustin Trammell was the guy that mined this block. And now if you look on Magic Eden and other places, there is a 286 badge that is there because I found those sats and I was like, we got to find the story behind this. And I think, you know, the irony of this is that when there was a little party about the new badge that was, you know, organized by some organizations and people, they didn't invite me. Even though I discovered it because I just was the one that was telling everyone how to do it, and I think they didn't like me. But you know, there's no complaining here. That's just how I roll. Like, I'm open source. I love sharing this stuff. But that's the reality of, you know, what happened in that world that I have the knowledge of. So yeah.
Yeah, it's certainly something that I think will get uncovered. I guess, you know, Bitcoin is meant to be a capitalist market, and that's how mining works. But, you know, everyone's going to have their different opinions on it, and everyone's entitled to. I think it's interesting that you brought up your mum understanding the kind of the rare sat, the like, almost, you know, if we could compare it in the real world, you know, this is the real world now. I mean, like the physical collectible world.
It was like
To rare coins, you know.
She like understood why you would care because she knew who Satoshi was and like the first crypto, you know. So I think there's so much untapped value in being able to explain that in that way, where someone that just thinks digital stuff is stupid, right, will all of a sudden be like, okay, I can understand, like, it's a rare coin. It's hard to deny that that has very many similarities to a rare coin, and you know, it's traceable, it can't change, it exists from that time, it'll never exist again. It is a true digital collectible.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think, you know, we can compare it to the physical world, you know, putting your art on something that's rarer that you can't get, that no one else has, or that just comparing it to like the coin collector community, and that there's only a certain number of coins from a certain number of year. It's actually why I quite like the Sense project as a side note. But yeah, it's that's fascinating. And do you think that, you know, you talked about before,
Sorry, you just cut out for a sec, mate.
You got me back?
I just missed the very start of it, yeah.
I was going to say, you know, and you've got that palindrome sat. Obviously, there are rare sats or exotic sats or special sats, however you want to refer to them, that are, you know,
so I found like
they might just be numbers that speak to people, though. Like, it's the interesting thing about them, I think, is that like maybe they're not more valuable. Like, maybe there are some palindromes out there.
Do you mean really, like a birthday, you know, or like, do you mean stuff like that?
Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch, right? Like, it could be a palindrome that speaks to you that's really not that rare. Or there are, because we can track and trace, like the sats come from a certain date or block or time, you know, that's the other thing. Like, I know, like, were you doing any of that? Were you looking for sats from certain time periods, or were you looking for specific special ones?
Well, do you know Postbook and her projects?
Yeah, of course.
So like she was doing stuff on ordinals, and her like insight into rare sats was the result of like a 2-hour conversation after a meetup in LA between me and her, where we just nerded out about math. So yeah, it's been really cool to just express the knowledge as well and like see people use it. And like she did dates that were just significant to astrological stuff, right, in that project that I'm talking about. And so that's kind of a version of, I guess, what you're saying, because she wasn't like a pizza sat. It was literally, I want a date where X thing happened astrologically, is my understanding. And so that's kind of an example of, you know, not that traditional to find pizza sat, vintage, Nakamoto, all the sort of stuff that has been there forever. Because the culture just decides this stuff, right? Like, if someone wants to say they like, I don't know, whatever number combination or a block number or this, like, they can just say that, find them, and convince the market they're worth more than a sat, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to perhaps even consider it through the lens that maybe they're not worth more than a sat, but they actually add, like, the reason why your palindrome definitely is rare, so that, you know, that's on top of it, but it also like adds a layer of narrative to your parent, because like you said, given the art style, and then that you know, lots of eights is a lucky thing in Asian culture. Like, you can, I feel like something super cool that we don't get on other chains through these sats is that the numerology and the dates and the timestamps and whatnot can actually add a lot of like value. I don't even mean financial, I mean value, like narrative wise,
to the
to the
story.
artwork as
And
well. Yeah.
and I think it's honestly, it's just like Bitcoin has this, no one else does. Like, we should lean into those differences, and this is a cool difference in my opinion. You know,
Yeah.
there's block 666 if you want, there's block 333 if you were like half of 666. Like, there's so many just little ways you can think of, you know, giving some more depth of meaning with, I guess, you know, it's a digital canvas of some description. So yeah, that doesn't exist anywhere else, you know.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really nice segue to bring you in, Sam, the artist behind this collection. But before we talk about the talisman, I, like, listening to all of this, like, somewhat tech speak, but how does it resonate with you? I think part of why I wanted to do this live stream as well was Adza was telling me, you know, that you're coming from a more, like, we'll call it the traditional art space, the physical art space. I know you've done some digital work before that Adza mentioned, but, you know, like, when you're being introduced into a scene like this, what's it like? And like, before you even talk about that, like, tell us about like who you are and what you've been up to in the past before. And yeah, first off.
Yeah, well, cool. Yeah, just I've been a tattooist for the last 20 years and been an artist since I left high school, and I've always been interested in you know, exploring different types of art, and having the time to be able to do that has been difficult over the years. But, you know, seeing different avenues that, you know, may or may not create revenue have opened my eyes to the possibility of you know, exercising different types of art more. So you're very interested in getting into, you know, the digital world. I see it bigger than say tattooing. I mean, it's just the next part of my journey. And inevitably, you know, you get into one type of art and it starts consuming your time and your life, and, you know, trying to find that balance. So, you know, that's why I'm definitely interested in getting involved, and the digital art. And I mean, once I had the iPad in my hand, it was like, you know, I questioned it for a very long time, you know. You know, and I never bothered with the Wacom or anything like that, or was never really interested in, you know, traditional animation or anything like that. But as soon as I got the iPad in my hand, I was scared because of the possibilities. So yeah, that's kind of my artistic journey to date in a nutshell. Basically, just wanting to do more art of all description, and trying to find a way, you know, which is hard as an artist to fund that, to find the time, without it, you know, going back to a 9 to 5 per se. But you know, that's that. But getting yeah. So, but being exposed to, you know, the Bitcoin, or, you know, and crypto, or however you want to explain that, you know, it still blows my mind. I have no idea. The only, you know, Adam or Adza just mentioned, you know, vintage block, and the only vintage block I'm aware of is Bega Cheddar.
So
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
so
I don't know.
just for the education, vintage is the first 1,000 that happened, which is
Yeah, you
the
can try
first
and
few
educate
days.
me. You can try and educate me as much as you want. It's sort of just still, it's still just above. It's getting there, you know. But I kind of like the relationship that we have, because I mine and Adz's relationship in regards to the fact that, like, he allows me to be kind of a little bit naive, and maybe a bit ignorant to the fact that I don't understand the technicalities of it all. And I mean, I think that that's a great trait that we have together. Essentially, that's creating a narrative in itself, really, isn't it? That
Well, yeah,
Adam and I have discussed a few times, the fact that it's kind of like we're masters of two different worlds. Not to
and
toot our own horn there either, though.
and just to like jump in, I think like where else do you find a 20-year relationship that has been a friendship, and then like we're in this place where we actually both have complementary skills, and we
Yeah,
get to like create something together. And I think like maybe one of our strengths is like I have known this dude for 20 years. Like we are just going to have a different working relationship than almost every person in this space, unless they have a high school time, in their life friend that they still know that they've always talked about art with, who's always listened about my digital stuff, even if it annoyed him or made no sense. But like, I think we do have a sort of unique ability there to like create something amazing as we keep creating like within this ecosystem.
For sure. And Sam, how did you like tell us about your career as a tattooist? Have you created physically as well, like off the human canvas? Like, do you like, and how have you kind of improved and refined your skills? And then tell us about that conversion onto drawing on the iPad.
yeah, well, for sure. I kind of fell into tattooing by accident. I was mucking around in my early 20s, heavily into graffiti.
Yeah,
Sort
like
of,
this one that he did, the 10th one ever in his garage.
well, yeah, the 10th one. I recently went over the first one I ever did. But I
Oh,
mean,
did you?
I was trying to find different ways to create revenue off my art. That's for damn sure. Out of high school, I was a sign writer, and I loved it, but I didn't love it enough because I wasn't creating my own art. So I drifted away from that and just sort of tried everything. I went down, and then being a graffiti artist, you sort of start being pushed towards sort of, youth work and council work and things like that, with murals and workshops and things like that. And I enjoyed that, but it just never seemed to take off for me. And then falling into tattooing by accident really took off, and I loved it because straight away people were giving me the ideas. I'd love doing art, but I never was an arty-farty type person. I could never, I had friends that would come around, and, we had pretty much the whole house was a studio, and, they'd sit there and they'd just paint for fun, and I couldn't really get into that unless it was sort of graffiti. But then when tattooing came, people gave me the ideas, and my mind was blown. I was like, right, you want me to draw something specifically for you? And they, obviously, yes, that's what I want to get tattooed. So that was just extremely important in my artistic career, because all of a sudden I had a reason to create art. So I just, flourished from there, and it just took off. And then about probably 10 years into my tattoo career, I was probably at the peak of my game, and, well, so to speak, really, really enjoying every moment of it. And another 5 years passed, and I sort of started, I had something clicked in my head, and I sort of started thinking to myself, and this was probably around about the time when I opened my own studio.
Well, I was going to ask if it was then.
In the back of my mind, the reason why I opened my own tattoo studio was not to tattoo, it was actually to try and find a way to do different art. So I was like, well, if I can get a team of guys together and we're paying the bills, and I build the tattoo studio with with other art in mind, with space to create that's not necessarily tattooing, I'll have the ability to explore other art. Because, you know, before that, I had the realization that every single thing I did was tattoo based, and every single piece of art, you know, it got to the stage where people would ask me to come and paint with them, you know, on a graffiti wall, and I would do a tattoo design, and I'd sit down in the morning before my client would come and try and draw for myself, and it would be a tattoo design. And, you know, somewhere there I was yearning to, that I'm like, you know, trying to telling myself that I wasn't just a tattooist, I'm an all-round artist, I need to explore. And that's just something that was happening in my mind. I know a lot of other tattooists and a lot of my friends that are tattooists are really, you know, just set at just tattooing. That's what they do, and they're happy with that, but I'm just not. So anyway, so yeah, you know, created the studio, and inevitably from there, what happened? All I did was tattoo. So I had to move on from there. And let's just say it. So that, you know, that ended up being a bit of a train wreck in the end, but moved past that.
Sam,
And then,
can I ask if you can mention like the installation type pieces you did?
well, I
on
haven't
train
got
lines?
to that yet.
Okay, I just, it's so cool. I need to make sure it comes up.
I'm getting through the section of
all right.
me being bogged down, you know, thinking I was going to have the time and have the space to be able to create art, but essentially, you know, owning your own business and tattooing, you know, I ended up, you know,
You were the
I was
boss,
tattooing
I guess?
8 hours a day, 30 days in a row, having one day off and then doing it all again. And I did that for 5 years. And then, so that was a train wreck. But what I was going to move on to next was the fact that, look, what happened after that? COVID came.
Gosh.
So all of a sudden I had this time. I didn't necessarily have anything else but time. And someone asked me again to come and you know, on an adventure to do graffiti. And, you know, we sort of went to the place, and, you know, we didn't have much. I definitely didn't have much. I had a few sort of tins, scrap tins here and there, and sort of grabbed it together, and we went to the spot, and I looked at all these guys, you know, straight to the wall with conviction of what they were going to do. And I sort of stopped, and I thought to myself, well, what am I going to do? And I didn't, you know, it was a very distinct moment, and where I said, look, I'm not going to do something that's tattoo based for the first time ever, kind of thing. You know, I'd been dabbling, because it was COVID, in different types of art. As I said, you know, it kind of evolved from there. And I turned around and I just did this random bird design, and people came, came up. My mates came up from when they'd finished painting. They said, "Did you do that?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "That's awesome."
Was
and
that
I was
one
like,
of
"Wow!"
the
So
Australian those Australian birds you were doing a while back?
No, it's very much the abstract stuff.
Oh, the abstracts. Okay, yeah, cool.
Well, it's all abstract, but it was just whatever I came out of my mind. It wasn't necessarily a type of bird.
I may have
But
showed
that's
Brett
neither here or there at this stage. But that's what. So there again. So there was a clear change and it gave me the motivation and the inspiration to go ahead and do more. And literally that afternoon when I got home, I kind of live in a funky area that's got sort of laneways and things here and there. I just automatically painted one out the front of my house. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, I've opened up an avenue here. And it was so exciting and so pleasing. And what it took was that train wreck and other things happening in my life for that to happen. And then from there, I I didn't say, necessarily F tattooing, but I strongly started going down another direction. With that conviction that I saw other people when they knew what they wanted to paint, that I suddenly I had conviction, and I had COVID on my side because you weren't allowed to tattoo. So next minute I was thinking, well, how do I, now I kind of feel like I'm arty-farty, but I don't really like that feeling. It's got to have some kind of direction. So how am I going to create that direction? So I automatically scrounged together all the money I could and started ringing galleries and trying to get an exhibition. Now it was COVID time, so no one was really giving out exhibitions. But the point I'm trying to make was I was looking for a deadline. I needed a deadline to then create a body of work and turn my arty-farty feelings of just painting because of fun into a job. And it didn't happen straight away. And I think what happened is I invited a friend of mine to come on board with me, and we created I wouldn't say fake, but we just created our own exhibition deadline date. And I think we went live on Instagram during COVID. We had 11 viewers or something one evening, and we showed off our paintings, and we sat around, and I set my lounge room / studio up as the gallery. And that was the first exposure I had of creating a body of work for an exhibition. And that really, really, excited me. And then obviously from there, next minute, COVID was sort of winding down, and I ended up having galleries approach me and say, well, yeah, you wanted to have a show, we're ready to go. And I think I did four exhibitions back to back, and that was over a 2-year period. So that was 2022, 2023. And there was a lot of mixed emotions there, discovering myself in this new world of art. And that was all new to me, and it was scary. I mean, it's scary to put in sort of 3 months work or even longer to then hang your paintings and have everybody so excited for you and enjoy the art and then not sell anything. That was an eye-opener. I was like, wow. And then so to essentially lose money because you're hiring the gallery. And so I had mixed emotions of shit. Well, do I do this again, or do I just call it quits and go back to tattooing? And I pushed and pushed, and I borrowed money and tried it again for the fourth time. So this would be the third actual gallery exhibition. Tried it for the fourth time and sold everything, and which is unheard of. And the gallery was like blown away. And I haven't done one since because of as great as that was to sell everything, it wasn't necessarily lucrative. So I had to think, well, shit, well, now what do I do? How do I sell out and make it lucrative? So, but I guess the point to my conversation here is, yeah, that's the evolution of my art and where it's gone.
Sam, at what point do I rock up with your house with an iPad Pro and say, bro, let's
just after this. So around about this sort of time, I was starting to realize, well, and obviously I could tattoo again. So that's the bread and butter.
Yeah, of course.
But being an old school tattooist, you kind of clientele grows with you. And there was a post COVID tattoo boom. And a lot of new kids jumped into the game and created new trends. And I mean, you live in Melbourne, Brett, so you understand. I mean, the tattoo industry is flooded here now. So I'm not going to say that I am at all pushed out, but I'm not part of the scene.
That's fair.
I never wanted to be part of the scene, but I'm definitely not anymore. So. But it's still bread and butter to this day. So getting back into tattooing and sort of just going through the motions and, subsequently having less and less time again to create other types of art. And then as Adam just came in and stated, yes, he just said, I want you to just give me a random phone call one day. And I think he was going through some things in his life, and we were connecting.
I think I was
again.
in like a job transition, perhaps, like something where you're
and just different life changes. I think I remember, which was prompted him to get tattooed. So we reconnected.
I've been getting tattooed, for 20 years by Sam, and I'm sort of like covered-ish.
Yeah, exactly. But I see people come and go when they, we're mates, definitely for sure. Through and through, but you don't see people for periods of time. But usually, as a tattooist, you really notice that something must be happening in somebody's life, whatever it is. Doesn't matter, but you'll see them again because they want to get tattooed. So we reconnected maybe after a couple of years, and I'm not sure if we discussed it at that particular time, but I was very into the mural thing as well at that time. Obviously, during COVID, I started doing murals because I didn't necessarily want to tag my name anymore. And, growing up, I still do, but that wasn't artistically where I was motivated. And so Adam, I think he had a tank at the back of his house at the time, and we discussed painting that, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, but yes, definitely all of a sudden there was talk of digital art. And I had no idea at that stage. I guess I knew what Bored Apes were. I'd looked at it. I thought it was tacky, maybe. I don't know. I didn't know anything. And Adam came and he said, look, I'm into this stuff. And there's this group that are starting this, new space or whatever you call it. And I want you to do digital art. And I said, I can't do digital art. The best I can do for you is scan something in and put it on Photoshop. And what is it? Do I do that? Is that what you want? And so then from there, I read into it more, and I said, I came back to him and said, no, man, I'm gonna need Illustrator and Procreate. I need an iPad. You can draw on those on the screen now. How easy does that look?
Okay, yeah. That's when I.
So I put it to him, and a day later, he rocked up to my house with an iPad.
And tell us, like, when you then started drawing on the iPad, did it feel dramatically different? Did it feel similar? And then also, like,
the programs are pretty.
Adz and I obviously know and have our heads around it naturally because we're heavily involved and I work in it, so to say, in it, in some ways.
Yeah.
So it's like, how did you feel the fact that your art was then going to be a digital collectible? Did it make sense to you, or how have you warmed to that?
Well, the iPad at the start was I was very optimistic about it, simply because I'd seen in earlier years tattooers start using it. Now, it's a great tool for tattooing. I mean, it's brilliant. But back when I first started, I was very skeptical, and I kind of was like, oh, you guys are just cop-outs, There's no better feeling than drawing on paper. And, I still believe that heavily. But I kind of looked at it, as an old fart, and I was like, nah, that's not for me. It's not for me. I swear I'm never going to draw a tattoo on the iPad. Nah. But then being exposed to it and picking the pen up, and I must say, learning it extremely, extremely quickly. The programs are pretty simple, and already knowing how to use Photoshop really helped. But yeah, just jumping on and then just pretty much learning on the go and realizing how the capabilities of it was, just blew my mind. And then I guess the feeling of my art then being used digitally, as you were asking, as an NFT at that stage, I guess was exciting to me. I was excited by and started learning and obviously looking at a few YouTube videos here, tutorials and things. There's a few out there on how to use the layers to create the traits. Now, that was the first
So
exposure I had with the NFTs. It was definitely going to be, trait-based artwork.
So we were going to generate a 10K, which was something that was, a new
putting the traits through the program or whatever, which is still above my head. That stuff, it's very interesting to me. But you get scared by technology or something you don't know, and you think, oh shit, I'll just stay back here and just draw it all and let someone else do it. I don't,
So you've been lucky that you've had adza, obviously. What would you advise, or how? Imagine you didn't have adza. Like, how would you encourage your friends who are also artists or tattooists to consider bringing their art to the digital realm as well? Like, what are some, obviously it's a big question, but what are some key things at least that you've learnt about it, or at least even just using the iPad for drawing?
That's a good question. Now, the only other artist that I know of who I think Adam probably would know too, or you definitely know, but a friend of mine, Matt Adnate. I think he sold it. I think he sold.
That did the flats in Melbourne, the giant faces on the flats.
Yeah, Brett would know him.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he was the only person I saw that that I personally know that had sold an NFT or was, and I think and that was based on the fact of, obviously he's a famous muralist anyway, so I think he sold a couple, solely based on his fame as a mural artist, not necessarily because he wanted to get into digital art. Now, I don't think it wasn't even digital art that he sold. I think they were photos of his murals, but they were NFTs. But getting back to your question, I have a friend who would do very well. Again, in my own mind, it's very much, I feel, it's the repetition. And I was talking to Adam about this before. That's something that I am really, really, really interested in. And I think that would be a suggestion to people who may want to get involved and do it, is to essentially, you're repeating yourself. Now, that's not necessarily with the traits side of it. And that's why I've decided with this first project, and I hope moving forward for the majority of my projects, maybe with a little bit of, to create rarity, a little bit of traits mixed in, but for the majority, just one of one. And you've really got to sit down and knuckle down and just draw, but repeating to create these complementing artworks that are creating the look of a project. Because that's what I see when I see digital art and I see ordinals and is just repeating artwork. So you've got to be open to that. I guess. I mean, but there's no. Look, I must admit, I don't want to, give Adz a big head here. But if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even consider it. Now that's got to be big too for people who might be looking to get into it just as an artist, a layman artist who doesn't know anything about anything in the digital, or more so in the crypto world. If I, that's the
Yeah.
scary thing. I mean, to be an artist, but to also have the time to figure out how to do any of it, or even have a stake in the game, or a name in the game. That's what it's got to be hard, and that would be that. I would suggest that. Yeah, there's no denying it that I probably wouldn't have tried it if I didn't know somebody who encouraged me so much,
Well, I think
assured
that's the beauty of it,
me
isn't
for
it?
how many years now, Adam, that this is going to work and this is going to be cool, and we're only
I mean,
just here.
like 2022, we started doing stuff, and really, this is the first
Yeah.
significant thing where we've like felt like it's the right thing. Like we inscribed it 16 months ago, and I'm sure Sam would have been happier for it not to sit on the shelf for 16 months as an artist. It can't be easy.
Well, it's I don't understand any of that other part of it. So, as an artist, when you see
the market
something drawn,
sucks and Bitcoin's down, he's like, okay, why does that matter? My art's the same. My art's still the same.
Yeah, and it's kind of like having, it is kind of, there was a feeling where, it's kind of similar to at the end of an exhibition, taking your artwork home and having it sit in your studio and gather dust. And I've got a few beautiful artworks here that are like that. And I kind of just, the first person who looks at them, I'm going to give them to them because, you've got, as an artist, as a field artist that I feel I am, I'm just like, I need to move forward, I'm not going to have another exhibition with old artwork. It's got to be new artwork.
Sam, maybe I have to come around and take you up on that offer. We've got Nick, the Gamma co-founder. Nick is actually the Gamma co-founder saying GM here, by the way, which is lovely to see him tune in.
Oh, what's up, mate? Nice to see you.
G'day, mate.
As we start to head towards the hour mark, which is where we will call it, let's finish off by, we've been introduced to Adza as the Sat Hunter, and he kind of like brought you, Sam, into the space. So it's really cool. That's why I think, that's how you do it. Sam comes in, and then Sam tells a friend, and then that friend tells a friend, and that's how people learn. And obviously, a big part of my job is, naturally holding new artists' hands as well. But we've got the mask, the talisman's code. I pulled it up on the screen. Hope you should be able to see it there. Yeah. We've been talking about you got on the iPad, you started drawing these. Like, let's finish off the last little bit. Obviously, as we say in Australia, give it a plug, but tell us a little bit about the set. They're very unique. They're like masks, PFPs. I've written an article about how PFPs really actually mirror mask culture, because PFPs are kind of like the digital mask that we wear. That may or may not be related, but that's one of the reasons why this collection spoke to me.
Yeah, look, so I was just searching, not necessarily searching hard, but just really looking for something that I could, again, I'll use the word, replicate, like repetition. I wanted something that I could repeat, but be slightly different and really nail home, like quickly and easily, per se. I mean, so I could sit there for hours and do them. So the mask spoke to me in that regard. I mean, I've been tattooing and drawing them for years. I mean, Japanese culture and artwork is a big part of tattooing. Always has and always will be, and it's something that I've been attracted to and enjoyed tattooing over the years, more so than your traditional American style art or whatever it may be. So the artwork itself spoke to me in that way. And then, as I said, it was like, well, yep, that's something that I can then take and essentially draw 100 times all different. Take reference from here, there, and everywhere, and add my own thing. And then, I think I'd started drawing examples of them before I put it to Adza about them being a collection. And one day I think I just had time and said to myself, yep, that's the one. And then from there started, the meaning of them started coming out. I thought to myself, well, these are the masks themselves, not the necessarily the fairy tale behind the hanya itself, but the actual mask, carved mask itself in Japanese culture is a talisman. So it's a collectible and it's a lucky charm to ward off spirits and things, right? So you have one hanging in your house, a carved mask. So again, that that lent towards, well, why wouldn't anybody want to have a lucky charm, especially in crypto? I thought that was really cool, and really, really, really fitting. And then from there, some of them have little traits that are just things in my life that I remember having and then not having suddenly. So you have, technology coming and going as quick as possible. I just threw them in there as a little, I don't know, a token of that. Just, it's hard to explain really, but you kind of get my gist of that's.
Yeah, well, it fits really well on Bitcoin because obviously now they're like a permanent digital record given Bitcoin's immutability. So it's like a little historical nod or a little historical reference, which is now
That's kind of what I was.
Yeah.
That's what I was kind of going for, and I think, then I start thinking, well, what is, I started thinking, well, what is an order? What am I actually trying to create here? And I'd spoken about it to Ads, numerous times, and it was interesting that he was speaking about his mother, because the way that I was trying to explain them to my parents was they're kind of like basketball cards, they're a collectible. And so that, that carried through that, and that carries through in the artwork. And I think that will carry through in all my projects moving forward, is the look and feel of an actual card, essentially, a collectible card, whether it be a Pokemon or a basketball or a football card even, it has those little, so that's why it has the little color swatch on the side, just little things I added like that to really create as if you could actually pick it up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, look, I think that's we've touched on a few interesting things because it was one of obviously the points of this live stream was you've come from a traditional space. Adza was obviously, deeply involved, but it's like, what are the things that make sense to people outside of, because Adza would know, like, he and I live in this space and we breathe this space, so we feel like everyone gets it, but they really don't, right? And so it's like rare sats are very much like rare coins or very rare canvases, and like these collectibles are like you just said, Pokemon cards, footy cards, they're things that you can collect. They're just digital now. So it's a nice way of fit, communicating to people who aren't involved as heavily as Adza and I are, obviously, what it means. Like you said, you told your parents, or you'll tell a buddy, over a beer at a pub or a coffee at a cafe, like what you've been up to lately. And that will hopefully, resonate with them and make sense to them. Boys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Adza, we'll finish off with you. Is there anything you want to leave us with before we wrap up?
I mean, not really, man. It's been a great conversation. Great to like talk to some Aussies and have that vibe definitely. And yeah, the mint is happening. I mean, it's tonight my time, but it's it's morning US time, ET kind of thing. It'll be announced. The price is 0.00111, so it's just over 100 US. And this will be the start of like the ecosystem that, well, Sam develops art for, and me and him collaborate on how to best put that out into the world in such a way that people don't feel like they're throwing away money, and people feel like they're getting real value, you know, for what they're holding. So we have plans around the conceptualize, like it's conceptualized as a good luck charm. Like they attract things to your wallet. We'll leave it at that, you know, like not going to throw every plan we have out there, but like the theme of it is something that will, you know, attract more art and more like cool opportunities, as that's, you know, it's the way Sam conceptualized it really. And I mean, our plan is always going to be to just sort of look after the supporters really, because this is, you know, we're not grinding for whitelists with other, you know, collabs and this. Like this is an art project because we think it's great fucking art. I support Sam, and I think we're going to do great stuff together. And you know, at the end of the day, I think I saw maybe Sam enjoying his tattooing, but I saw like a lot of creativity that he had no time to get out of his head because the motherfucker is doodling constantly if I'm ever with him, or like, you know, so it's like if he could be drawing constantly and didn't have to worry about money, I think he probably would, you know. So for me, it's like honestly like an honor to get him to a spot where he can just create unencumbered after so long of being able to create. But like, you know, I want this on my leg, Sam, so too bad if you want something else on my leg. It's a tattoo. So it'd be nice to give him that freedom, dude, because I've seen his works, his studio, his half-done works. Like, he's got so much talent, man. So it's fucking great working with someone I've known for like 2 decades now.
Love to see it. Well, Sam, you know, pleasure to have you in the ecosystem with us now. Obviously, if you've got friends that want to learn, you know, you'll be a great reference now. You can
yeah. I've got a few, and I want to say thank you to you, Brett, for the platform you've created for us, and the time you've given us now too. Thank you.
Nah, pleasure. All right, we'll leave it there. Great to have you on, and thank you to everyone who tuned in. Looks like we had over almost a few hundred tune in, which is terrific. So it's a great morning. All right.
Awesome. All right. Peace out. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you so much, mate. Look forward to working with you more.
Peace out, boys.